Many games out there forego usual game design in favour of that ever-beloved mindset of, you know what, screw those babies who paid hard-earned money to play our game and give you the most daunting challenges imaginable right at the very start, and never really let up from there. Well, turns out that I'm just a sucker for pain. I'm Ewan, this is WhatCulture Gaming, and here are 10 grueling video game levels that were just the beginning. Number 10. Level 1. CONTRA. The first level of CONTRA is legendary among Gen X gamers. I mean, I would know that as I'm just an average, ordinary, avocado-chomping millennial, but still, it gave players one of the most perfect walkthroughs of everything you can expect from this game. Fast-paced run-and-gun action, and dying. This entry makes for a good representation of every super hard NES game that kicked your butt and then laughed in your face as you processed how little progress you'd actually made in the long run. Sure, it doesn't show you a detailed map of the game's levels like later NES games would do, but dying to this first level as many times as you're guaranteed to, only for you to realize how much was left, is pretty brutal on its own. Number 9. Chapter 1. Viewtiful Joe. The GameCube era is one of the all-time best eras of Nintendo in the company's history, from a creative standpoint at least. And one of the system's standout cult classics was the stylish beat-em-up Viewtiful Joe. Shame, then, that the game is dead set on making sure that you never see the game beyond its first level. Chapter 1 of Viewtiful Joe is infamously unforgiving to new players, throwing you at tons of enemies without properly teaching you the controls, and with nowhere near enough life to survive without a lot of concentration and thinking on your toes. And on its own, that would be fine. But not 5 seconds after you get your titular Viewtiful Joe powers, does the game then throw a helicopter at you, whose only weak spot is centimeters away from its whirring copter blades that chop entire valleys off your life if it hits you. Oh, and like any other self-respecting beat-em-up from the early noughties, you have a limited number of lives. Lose them, and it's back to the beginning. Number 8. Forest Follies, Cuphead. Cuphead prides itself at being one of the hardest games of the 2010s, and considering its steep competition for that title, that's saying a lot. So it stands to reason that Cuphead kicks your ass 6 ways from Sunday right off the bat. Forest Follies, while giving you a much better tutorial than the other games on this list, is still soul-crushingly hard, with your tiny amount of life being offset by enemies and projectiles coming out of every nook and cranny of the screen, and you being armed with a measly little water gun and a jump parry that only works on pink objects and that you are going to screw up the first 2 times you use it. Needless to say, people die a lot on this level, possibly even more than the others due to first-time players not being as experienced with the controls yet. Oh, and just to rub salt in the wound further, this is also where you become acquainted with Cuphead's most infamous system, showing you your level/boss progression every time you die, both to encourage you to try again, and just to humiliate you when you see how far you had still to go. Number 7. GALLEON MINERVA, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Metroidvanias, at least the really good ones, tend to be really hard, so it makes sense that Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, the best Metroidvania since the DS Castlevania games made by the same director, funny that, would be incredibly challenging right off the bat. But at least those classic Castlevanias that Bloodstained rips off so lovingly lets you get into the damned castle most of the time before the pain begins. This game kicks your ass as soon as you wake up on the boat to the castle, the GALLEON MINERVA. Despite the snark, Bloodstained is a very different animal from its Castlevania predecessors in very subtle ways that will become clear to you if you approach it expecting otherwise. Miriam's attacks take some getting used to, the shard system is a bit complicated, you're looking for a save point, and every step of the way the game is hounding you with tough enemies and a nightmarishly difficult first boss. And once you kill him, after no doubt multiple attempts, the boat stops and the game can officially begin. Yay. Number 6. Undead BURG, Dark Souls. Frankly, I could have made this list made up of levels from Software games, and only because they haven't made 10 Soulsborne games yet, but for the sake of maintaining some creative integrity, not a lot, I mean I am a man on the internet for God's sake, but some, I managed to whittle it down to just one, the Undead BURG from Dark Souls. While not the hardest level in the game, make no mistake, this is where you will become intimately familiar with Dark Souls' legendary difficulty. The Undead BURG can actually be considered a perfect introduction to how the game is going to work going forward. Enemies hit hard, you must be on constant alert if you want to survive, and if you aren't a pyromancer, well, good luck. all culminating in the Taurus demon fight requiring a lot of strategic usage of the environment around you in order to win. And while finally defeating it will feel so damn good, it takes one mere glance at the horizon around you to see just how much farther you still have to go. Number 5. Chapter 1, Ninja Gaiden 2004. I suspect the mindset behind the creation of the 2004 Xbox reboot of the Ninja Gaiden series went a little something like, hey, you know how we kick players' teeth in the original NES games? Yeah, how about this time we don't stop kicking until their skulls are putty beneath our boots? The first level of Ninja Gaiden 2004 establishes pretty much immediately that however hard the NES originals might have been, these new games are even harder thanks to a combination of enemies hitting so hard they make you wonder what the point even is of having a health bar, and janky as hell early 2000s 3D gameplay. What puts this level and the ones after it in the final stretch is not just the insane challenge, but how early and how hard it hits you, making you not only frustrated with the game kicking your ass, but dreading the fact that it only gets harder from here. Number 4. Death Mountain, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. This may not be the very first dungeon, but it's early enough to smack you upside the head with its out-of-nowhere challenge, making you quake with terror as you realise that you have a whole game left to go. Zelda 2's Death Mountain is infamous among NES veterans as one of the most out-of-left-field difficulty spikes in gaming history. Not just because of the radically different gameplay style of Zelda 2 leaving players still getting the hang of things by the time they reach Death Mountain, but because this is where the game decides to throw most of its mid to higher tier enemies at you all at once, in cramped corridors where you're unable to dodge as effectively as elsewhere in the game, and you are definitely not at a sufficient enough level where you can deal with them yet. Fortunately, this is an RPG, so if you keep ramming your head against the wall, you will eventually make it through, but such a 90-degree spike in difficulty so early on has forever traumatized an entire generation of Zelda fans. Number 3. The Ether Mines, XENOBLADE Chronicles. While technically not the first dungeon in the game, the one before it was more of a tutorial for how dungeons work in Xenoblade. The Ether Mines, on the other hand, is your first proper dungeon, with multiple sprawling floors littered with enemies and secrets to unlock. And your reward for getting through all of that is a rematch with a giant robot, known in this game as a Mechon, that kicked your ass up and down the street beforehand. We do not have much ass left to work with, guys. I'm very, very scared. And that's where we get into the story, because as challenging as this dungeon is, what makes it so intimidating is how the story uses the dungeon. You spend hours upon hours working through this dungeon, grinding your level to finally take on this Mechon and save companion Shyla's little brother, and potentially the rest of her people. And this Mechon, Zord, is one stubborn bastard, coming back over and over and over and over before finally going down. You imagine the mines feeling like a big damn hero, and then the main antagonist arrives with his army of Mechon identical to the one you just spent hours fighting and just barely managed to put down. I'm fine. This is fine. Words cannot adequately describe the dread and hopelessness that comes with this cutscene after the Ether Mine. All that effort just to be told, congratulations, you killed one, just a few billion to go. Xenoblade Chronicles is a long-ass game, and the way the game informs you of this is nothing short of brutal. Number 2. The Great Plateau, Breath of the Wild. If you're a new player, the Great Plateau is going to kill you a lot, and if you're a veteran Zelda player but playing the game for the first time completely blind, you're going to die even more because this game is unlike any Zelda game that's come before, and it isn't afraid to throw your ass into the deep end and laugh as you drown mere inches from shore. For the first lesson of Breath of the Wild is that the stamina wheel rules all. Long may it spin, greased with the blood of the heretical. The second lesson of Breath of the Wild, which you learn very quickly afterward, is that the world doesn't like you. Link may be the chosen hero, but he's been asleep for a while, and that rest has taken its toll, as even certain bokoblins can take you out in just one hit. On top of that, the climate is something you must constantly take into account as you climb the plateau's single mountain and get very acquainted with the cold. The Great Plateau runs you through everything the game will be expecting of you and in a way that ensures you will never forget. And then you open your map to discover that after all of that, you have cleared on less than 1% of this gigantic game. Good thing it's so good. Number 1. The Tutorial, Driver. For those uninitiated, this is considered to be one of, if not the worst example of a tutorial in a video game. You are plopped down into the game without any information about the controls and told to perform a series of insanely complex driving techniques in 1 minute. Fail, and you have to do all of it all over again. Some are simple, like performing a 180-degree spin. Others are simply called slalom. What's a slalom? To this day, no one truly knows, but you have to do it if you want to see the rest of the game. Combine all this with the fact that the game is just kind of, well, really naff, and you have the one entry on this list where most people just probably put the game down for good before even reaching the first level. Not fast, but definitely furious. And those were 10 grueling video game levels that were just the beginning. Know of any other punishing first levels that heralded the worst was still yet to come? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and to subscribe to WhatCulture Gaming so you don't miss another upload going forward. That's all for now though, take care, and I will see you next time. Bye!